Hey everyone, this is the Manips and Sips podcast. Feature me, I'm Dr. Jeremy Boyd. My partner in crime over there, Dr. Brandon Cruz. Today we're going to be talking about if you can't get the glutes firing, what can we do? This is sometimes seems like a simple project for a lot of our clients, but can be pretty challenging for some of our, even our non-active to our most elite athletes. So figure it'd be a good conversation. Always like to talk a little bit about, Buns by Boyd at my clinic. So figure we bring it to nips and sips. But before I talk too much, Brandon, how's it going?
Going well. You saw I was sipping on and through my candle holder crunk cup over here.
Drunk up.
Got it's my Noble Oak. It's become kind of my mainstay here the past few episodes, but going well. What's going on your end, man? Feel like we haven't connected in a while. How was your? I know you were at IAR, right? Correct.
Yep,
For your fellowship. So hope you learned some good stuff. I don't know if you want to kind of give us a quick recap and what you're drinking as well.
Yeah. So it's I had done in the tail end of the, I guess, didactic workload of going for courses and those sort of things. Had the advanced lumbosacral spine course taught by Ben Volkman, a very impressive clinician for IAR. It's cool, awesome facility. I got pumped as hell when I brought a basketball hoop into my clinic. They have a full half court at their facility. I was like, damn. But it was, really just awesome being around some high level clinicians, learning a lot more techniques. We did just some different variations of manipulations. In our fellowship, I went from doing kind of techniques in a specific area like TLJ to lumbosacral to, try and get specific levels. They want you to take a next step further of like, all right, it's someone with a potential difficulty with more closing techniques. Well, you need to hit the specific area and a more closing technique versus opening technique. So learning those things are definitely awesome to add to my toolbox. Will I use them every single time? Probably not, but certain those trickier patients are not, they're there for me. So definitely had an awesome time, and then learn more into neurodynamics, their approach with things, a little bit about movement system impairments by Sorman. So I haven't been too much exposed to that besides what I just read here and there. So I definitely had a great time, always do. And I guess
quick question. Sorry. After this, I know we've talked about this, I guess more of a side note, but it's on air. Can you start training now? Can you start your mentoring?
I can. I have one more course.
When's that?
I have one more course to do in October, like middle of October. Okay. But I can start my mentorship hours at that point. So
after October.
Yeah. Middle of
okay.
October.
Well, I just got my email saying I was approved for my fellowship.
Whoa!
Except I owe $60. It is money grab everywhere, man. So I guess I gotta call her. I gotta call her and pay. There's a difference, I guess. Now that I'm a fellow, you have to bump up. You have to pay fellowship dues. So now it's an extra $60.
Oh yeah!
Come on, really? Just
for your
officially unofficial.
Officially unofficial. Come on now.
Can't wait to start mentoring you though.
Oh, that'd be all. I really can't wait. And that's what they always say, and that's a nice thing about the residencies and the fellowships. They all harp on the same thing. Is the most important part is the mentorship. And I can't agree more. It's like, great, you learn new techniques, you'll get updated with the most current literature and everything like that. But that constant mentorship, being with someone who's higher level than you, thinks a different way than you, challenges you to deliver better care, and doing that frequently. And, it's 150 hours at least. So that's a lot of actually. I don't know if it was a case for you, it's 150 different clients. So it's just like, as long as you treat people for an hour. So it's not like apparently it doesn't count from if I saw someone, let's say on a Tuesday and saw the same person on a Thursday, apparently that doesn't count. It has to be someone different. I was like, no wonder why it takes so long.
That's harder then.
Yeah. So
I just
they
had to do
want,
150 hours. So I had the same, you caseload. You have follow up sessions.
yeah,
So
they want certain things to be follow up. And we have like live patient exams where I have to evaluate someone. I have to write you a plan of like everything, and the director of the fellowship, Toko. And then the next 3 sessions, write up about each one, and then the fourth one, you essentially come in and either say good job or grill my balls. And that's just kind of improving things. Hopefully we're on the similar page, but
gotcha.
yeah, so
All right.
looking forward to it. And then so just to kind of get onto our topic here, I'm gonna have some Lagunitas. I've had a couple of their beers. This one's called Hop Stupid, like on a stoop. I think I've had it in the past, but there's a client, Eric Jones, gave it to me. He's been over to like 200 to 200 breweries. He's all over the country, and he picked out some of his favorite beers. So he gave me this a while ago, and I've been saving it for this show ever since. But yeah, we can get this party started talking about them glutes. As I say in my clinic, we have a big thing of Buns by Boyd. So we do believe in the importance of trying to fire up them glutes. But again, sometimes we run into a occasional trickier patient where maybe they can isolate it on a table, great, but start transitioning into more functional movements, they start having some difficulty. So it takes a little bit of finesse. But Brandon, what about you? I talked
What's your rating, man? I'm waiting for this rating here. And look at that, Dallas. What's that cup say?
Dallas Blonde.
Nice.
Which I had this weekend because the course was over in Dallas, and also enough, my hotel had a Top Golf suite, but they had Dallas Blonde theirs, which was a really good beer. But did
you hit some?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with another guy in my fellowship, Grant.
Nice.
And we played for like 2 hours, and based on the virtual, I looked actually pretty good, but doesn't always translate to the real world.
Randy there?
Huh? No, Randy wasn't there for this one. He does most of his stuff in Charlotte, but I think hopefully I get to see him once or twice more.
Nice.
But I give this definitely your standard kind of IPA feel to it. I'm gonna give it a 7.3. That's my middle of the road. One of these days I'm gonna get into the 8s and 9s. I'm waiting for it.
Yeah, you started off with your ratings pretty high, and then they've pretty much sizzled down. So I don't know if you're
becoming a beer snob, apparently.
Everything.
Yeah, I'm just drinking a lot of it.
Let's good for you. I can't. It's just fucking nasty. But anyway, yeah. So glutes firing. What do I do? I mean, I'll start. I think low level stuff is good to go with. I do my bridges and clamshells. I mean, I'd pretty much say most patients are getting that. I don't care, how not flashy or sexy it is. They're getting some sort of variation. I do them to this day, integrated with my warm up. Whether it's that or I load it up with a bar, or then I go into a hip thruster. There's some variation, whether double leg, single leg, banded, non-banded. Like there's something there. In terms of, I guess, what do we do to get them firing if we're having trouble? One of many different things. On the exercise side and cueing side, I'll have them perhaps crunch, for lack of a better term, engage their abs, maybe do a reach or something where they're engaging their abs. So their abs and glutes are working together, kind of gets them out of that extended or low back or lumbar arch position. And that's kind of, if you go back to Vladimir Yanda's lower crush syndrome, we have the extensors and the hip flexors work together, our abs and glutes work together. So I try and work in synergy there, and also kind of play around with that agonist antagonist, turning some muscles off, turning some muscles on. And we say the term firing. I feel like we have to kind of preface it because people will be like, you're not activating, you're not firing. Listen, use whatever term you want to use. I think we're just kind of using that to use the term engagement, firing. So whatever, if you're going to try and heckle us on the actual verbiage, whatever. But so yeah, I'll do that. Sometimes I'll have the patient point up their toes because patients will feel it in their hamstrings, or they start getting cramping in their hamstrings, which is indicative of glutes not working, hamstrings working too hard. So if we get the dorsiflexion going, it forces them to use their quads, therefore inhibiting their hamstrings, therefore making their glutes one of the only ways they can really bridge up. And again, this is going back to some P&F principles, agonists, antagonists, it's insufficiency type principles that we learned way back when during kinesiology and stuff like that. So before I get into some other tactics, what do you like to use, Mr. Buns by Boyd?
Buns by Boyd.
You have a name to live up to.
Yeah, I know. So we have Buns by Boyd in the clinic, calves, hammies by Hannes, and calves by Cam. It's probably all things that we actually need to individually work on the most of the three of us. We have to work on our own track.
No homo here. I don't know, especially when we're playing golf. Your buns tend to bust out of your golf shorts.
Yeah,
they're looking pretty good there.
Leg dominant, yeah. But I had Justin assess me recently for something else that was going on, and he said that he's like, yeah, at least you live to the name better. But I don't even know how it started. I think at one point, maybe just looking at the clinic one day, there was just it was a client that started. He just was watching like my clients, and 2 or 3 of them must have been doing like clamshells or bridges all at the same time. This is before I started Trifecta, and he started rattling off names of, I think, Buns by Boyd or Boyd's Bun House or something like that. There's a couple good ones, so I've been sticking with it since. But yeah, I do similar things. I know I'm in more of an advanced population, and a lot of people kind of try and throw like those more basic ones of bridges, clamshells, under the bus. There was a period where I was like, I ain't doing that bullshit of, because it was like too basic and those sort of things. And I was having a tough times, maybe just getting things started, but they are important. This article I reference, I don't take it to heart because EMG studies, they definitely have their flaws associated. Most of them are on healthy individuals. Let me just put this up. I think most people know this article. It's a really good one. The Electromyograph Analysis of Glute Medius and Glute Max during rehab exercises. I think they may have actually updated this, but this is the one I just had on me. It kind of gives you just maximum volitional control of all these certain exercises. One of the things after reading this article, I believe somewhere in this, they just kind of talk about gluteal squeeze, and just like reading that, and I kind of threw, especially for glute max contracting, and if you look at like an overflow principle, I was just like, I'm not doing like basic isometrics for a long period of time. Sometimes it's priming up everything with that, with a basic glute squeeze, maybe advancing into like a physio ball glute squeeze. Has been really beneficial for me. And even like, I have people who can, deadlift 400, 500, 600 pounds. And a lot of times, they're tweaking their back, and then you start trying to test their glutes, and they can't even do basic MMTs. Priming them up with even some basic stuff like that actually is pretty effective. And for a while, I kind of wrote that off as, this is too basic for me. But sometimes you have to break it up to its simplest parts. And then from there, I do like to transition it into more of those functional movements, get them into hip hinges, hip thrusters with like a barbell. And then I like it in that kind of sequence of something very basic, prime it up. And if you look at your big strength coaches, Mike Boyle, Bobby Smith, Adam Fight, if they look at their general performance, what they do to kind of prep their athletes in their warm-ups, they're doing the same stuff. So if they're at the most elite levels of strength and conditioning, and have excellent programs and writing the books on this sort of stuff, that has its place. So from there, I'll start to go and transition to obviously more advanced things. But yeah, it's kind of how I get things going there, Brandon. But
yeah, I'll say before I get into the kind of manual therapy bias, just because that's what this channel's about. The more I've learned, so I've been practicing. I graduated in 2013, so officially practicing. What's that coming up? I guess
7?
I just finished 6 full years. I'm entering my 7th now. The more I've learned, the more I've worked with people, the more I realize basic is needed for most people. I'm going to even argue, even especially the athletes, the higher level athletes, and just for some street cred. I've worked with D1 athletes at Temple, at University of Florida. I've worked with NFL combine athletes, athletes coming from all over the country to do combine prep. I've worked with cyclists. I've worked with elite runners, basketball players. I'm trying to think just off the top of my head baseball. I've had a couple of MLB guys. They can do the high level stuff. They can do the fancy stuff. That's what makes them that's what makes them professional. They can compensate. They can figure out a way. But you give them something easy to do, or simple exercise that's done the correct way, and you critique the shit out of them the way it's supposed to be done, and you avoid those compensation or those compensatory patterns that they've developed and gotten that far with. And they're hurting. They're not hurting. They're struggling. They're sweating. They're trembling. With just the simple exercises. So for all you new grads out there, especially the ones that want to go into sports rehab, I've said it before. I'll say it again. Sometimes the simpler the better. Yeah, it's fun. It's nice to do some of the higher level, fancier stuff. That's probably what keeps them engaged in rehab. So they're not just doing a bunch of clamshells and bridges on the table. That's where creativity comes in. But you saw the EMG. I mean, front planks with a glute squeeze. That's what hip extension is, basically, a glute squeeze, as well as bridges. Those are your top 2. I mean, how more boring can you get? But if we're trying to get somebody out of pain, get them to recognize what some turning on is, only they have that feeling. So we can only describe so much, but we have to put them in positions where they can feel success, whatever success is for them, and now build upon that, layering it with exercises. I'll say that. But Jerry, I mean, I know you're in a sports fellowship, so I don't know if you have anything to kind of add to that before we move on.
No, I couldn't agree with you more in regards to that sort of stuff. In our residency, I think Bill Egan said it the best is, the basics is what really fixes people. I don't care who, I've went from general population to sports rehabilitation, and that still rings true. Absolutely. He used to say, he's like, you're a great therapist. All they need is a table and a couple dumbbells and a band. And I agree with that. And your hands. So I think the table and the hands are in your brain. That's a package deal. And the goal is always to get people off the table. Don't get us wrong, but that, expertise and obviously your diagnostics and that sort of stuff, but it's most of what people end up having pain and dysfunction with is because they missed out on the basics a lot of the times. Sure, if they're having really shitty form of the snatch or something like that, and you're catching it, improving their movement and that sort of things is obviously going to make them better. But usually, especially if they get into the elite level, their form is probably pretty decent, and they're just missing out a component of things. So, I'm still at this level where it's like, hey, hit those foundational things, and you'll probably get pretty close to all the way there, and then integrate it with the more advanced, more fancier stuff. I agree with you with the engagement stuff. So I do a lot of things purely for that reason, is there's engagement, keeping it fun for the athlete, making sure they're staying motivated to keep coming back and that sort of stuff. But
in terms of question there, in terms of let's say these exercises aren't working, or we can't get them to feel what they need to feel, what alternatives, what other methods are you trying to implement to kind of bypass whatever is inhibiting them?
Yeah, I've had a lot of those over the years, and I'm glad to say I'm starting to develop more strategies to help out those. I had a gal who, I swear to God, couldn't do a basic bridge without feeling it everywhere else besides her glutes. And just a gluteal squeeze, just a glute set, took 2 to 3 weeks, and I'm like, am I doing this wrong? I tried different cues and manual tactile cues and different analogies of, pinching $1 million between your butt cheeks, and she just couldn't grasp it, almost to the point where I'm like, do I need to refer out, because she legitimately could not bring her butt cheeks together. I remember I had like interns and students, and they were just like, they're just as lost as I was, and just more of a surprise factor. Certain strategies that I've if it comes down to those individuals, I think who developed the name of Gluting Amnesia? Is that
was it Contreras?
No, it was oh man, who developed Gluting Amnesia?
No, let me see if I can pull it up.
Who's big 4 exercises for back pain? Now it's slipping me.
Miguel?
Beer. Miguel. I think Miguel developed the name.
Yep. Miguel.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, me and a half a beer, half my memory's gone. Whether it's, sitting on our asses or, screwing up the leg tension relationship and those sort of things, it happens. I thought, what was it? The TPI course we took? Yep. And watching all of them do an overhead squat in like United States where we were taking the course, and then watching, was it China or Japan, where they sit ass to grass for like just everything.
Yep.
Just all of them doing it perfectly, and less than half of us can get an overhead squat right. Yep. So maybe it's a societal thing, who knows, but it definitely happens to some degree. Yes, are the fibers probably firing? Do a muscle magically forget to work? No, unless you probably have a spinal cord injury or some sorts. But is it firing enough or contracting enough, whatever words you want to use? I do believe that happens. And certain strategies like that one individual where, everyone was just in shock and awe, came to the point where I had to slap, Russian stem on them bad boys. I had her go to the bathroom. I was like, I need you to put it here and here. Felt it through her pants. Started racking it up while she was doing like glute sets and just trying to progress it. And once they started going, her symptoms started to get better. As we mentioned in previous podcasts. So I haven't done that really much since. That was the only tool I really had outside of, tactile cues and those sort of things. I know people have used biofeedback devices. I don't have one currently. I consider it always. It's always on like my toy list that I want to get. Just has, I usually buy things spontaneously. It's like, all right, I have a client that needs this now. I'm going to buy this now. But right now, don't really need it. I'll try what I have in the office, and then I'll go get it. So biofeedback, I used it as a student for more quad sets for post ACLs. That seemed to help out some of those trickier ones. Mentioned in a previous podcast, what I use mostly BFR for, I know is mostly for an ACL client, but I don't really go crazy with that so much anymore. I use it more just for actually glute stuff. It happened by accident. I had them do like a warm up with the BFR, and they're like, damn, I can really feel my glutes. And the next day they're like, that was the first time they reported any glute DOMs to a degree. So those sleepier glutes, I've been using that a lot of. And then on a don't try and oversell this sort of thing, based off of the lower trap spinal manipulations study that we've discussed by Cleland that we discussed. I have tried performing lumbosacral or lumbopelvic manipulations, and
Mm-hmm.
have actually had some success with people actually feeling it with like a bridge. I've actually played around almost as a test retest principle. Is like, hey, why don't we try this bridge and see where you feel it, or a clamshell. I've done both, and I was like, all right, well, this technique can help loosen you up and those sort of things, and I just want to see how things go. And I've actually had some decent success with people not feeling it in their glutes pre-manipulation and actually feeling it post-manipulation.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I've been. I've gone to a point of, again, tactile cues if I help them kind of squeeze in together. But just main thing is like talking to the client, like, this is where you should feel it. A lot of people are doing the right things, especially runners. Like, oh, I've done clamshells and glutes and, deadlifts and that sort of stuff. I'm like, oh, where do you feel it normally? Oh, my back and my hamstrings. Okay, all right, well, the idea is that you actually feel it and point. So a lot of people with like clamshells or side, or actually the classic is side to side walks with a band.
Yep.
And they always point to the front of their hips, kind of TFL region. I'm like,
or the quads.
Or the quads. And they're like, yeah, it burns like hell right there. I'm like, that's nice. It's an exercise, movement's great for you. But ideally we want it in more towards the glute med territory. So those are some things I use. But Brandon, what about you? Ooh, there's one thing, and you probably have experience with it. I don't. I always wanted, like, since taking dry needling and using it with E-stem, that's something I wish that's something we could do.
Yeah. I've definitely done it with that. On a few accounts, I guess I'll start there. Yeah, whether it's trigger point and kind of leaves you a little sore. So sometimes there's a latency effect and you're a little inhibited before you can use them again. But yeah, with stim at high, stim at hard. Sometimes I'll work on the speed. What I'm looking for is that rhythmical contraction. There's no set time. It really depends on the person. But once I get that going, you send them over to the exercise. I'll do it to the low back, whether it's L4-5, S1 region, why? Because those areas innervate those muscles. So I want to be able to try and indirectly affect that pathway. That pathway is being the nerves. So if we can, needle those segments and the multifidi around that, usually it kind of opens it up. That's Dr. Gunn's theory.
Physiological.
We talked about last week. His theory there. So, that's one method. To piggyback off of what you said with the low back, there's a few articles, quite a few actually, that point to mobilizing the hips, the hip joint itself to create that activation. And some of those Scott Burns articles references those other articles as well, because he did his PhD, or I believe is doing his PhD. If not, he's just had a lot of articles on this topic. Hip back syndrome. So he points that out, and it makes sense. What if somebody is lacking hip extension, so they can't clear their hips, so therefore they're extending their back and kind of knocking out their glutes from being the prime mover. If they're lacking internal rotation as well, I think extension and internal rotation probably the top two. But that requires you to do an assessment and not just a guess. Is this person lacking something? Okay, if I mobilize their hip and for whatever reason I'm able to get them into more hip extension, do their glutes fire more? Is it neurophysiological? Is it a biomechanical effect? Is it placebo? Is it all the above? Who knows? But being able to definitely assess that. Definitely cueing and educating that patient. I think education is the big thing. Having that patient understand, and it may take a few sessions for them to get that aha moment. And it definitely is frustrating because, like you said, you could be 2 or 3 weeks and some of these patients just don't get it. Some of those patients, you can tell they're not doing the home exercise program now because it surely shouldn't take that long if they're really dedicating themselves to it. So that's something there. And this is just like, I guess, a bias of mine. Though I like dry needling and stim, I don't like Russian. I just feel like I should be able to get it without. You lose, you want to talk about research, you lose so much connectivity there with the pad and the skin. But when needed, I'll pop it on for an ACL or glute, especially now since you can't throw a needle. It's really just bombarding that system with something, and then trying to find regressions for patients. ISO holds too. Once they do feel it, can they sustain it? Can they emphasize a glute squeeze? That's probably what I do. Neurodynamics, talking about trying to impact that nervous system or those pathways. The nerve is what controls the muscles. The nerves are connected to the brain. We have to be able to make that connection. So in some instances, I'll do some neurodynamics or nerve glides. And then you could always do some TNF stuff or some assisted patterning, whatever you feel like you need to do to get something going.
Absolutely. Yes. I'd say, and I think we mentioned before, I think nerves run the show with a lot of things, or pretty much a lot of neuromusculoskeletal system. So if they're not happy or they're not moving, whatever theory you want to take, there's a ton of theories out there. If they're just not operating efficiently, they're not going to supply or innervate those muscles as much, and that'll lead to some issues for sure. So I agree with that. Actually, as you mentioned, like the hip mobs, I've had two D1 baseball player, a D1 prospect soccer player, and a very high level Olympic weightlifter, and just doing hip mobs to hip extension, especially. That's I'll again use that test retest, so I'm not kidding myself. Where why don't you try and do some contractions for me? Tell me how you feel. It feels a little bit different on the usually the involved side, and then perform the mobilizations. And especially with people who do a straight leg raise and extension, and a lot of them they'll feel it in their back or something like that. Doing a hip extension mobilization or whatever their limitation may be, and then retesting that. And more often than not, if there's a range of motion limitation or feels tight to get into that, they'll be right afterwards, listen, I'm just feeling my glute now. So, and it's not just purely, I've had, their neuromuscular patterns building from doing reps. It's, hey, if you do 10 reps, see how it feels. Then I'll go mob it. And then they're wow, it feels a lot different. So, it's just a kind of a cool thing to do.
And are these patients coming in for low back pain?
Low back pain, and the field players, hamstring issues. So it's just So research tells us with those people, we got eccentric loaded hamstrings. And I'm neither of these kids, they're high school kids. Well, one's in college, the other one's a junior, senior. Neither of them had hip extension. Just passively, even screw actively. Just couldn't get to couldn't even get to neutral with one kid. Strong as shit too. This kid, he's maybe 5'8", or he's short. He's small. Could do a 475-pound squat. Good. And I've seen it because we worked with him for a different issue in the past, and he's doing well, but he wasn't able to fully get those glutes going because he had no hip extension. So fast as shit. And this kid floats. I should send videos of this thing, but amazing what he could do. Again, as you mentioned before earlier in the podcast, this episode is how amazing they can do without being very efficient in the largest muscle group and essentially the biggest workhorses of the entire body. So and all three of them excellent outcomes.
I was going to say the reason why I asked on their energy they're coming in for, they're lacking hip extension. Most of those people are going to either have low back pain because they're going into lumbar extension or TL junction extension, because where else are they going to get it from? Hamstring issues because they can't fully extend their hip, and maybe their hamstrings are working double time because their glutes aren't offsetting it. We have patients who lack internal rotation or external rotation, usually internal rotation. So where they're going to get rotation from, their low back, where if you spend some time to mob that hip, create some type of space, and then fire up those muscles so they can now work in that newly provided range. A lot of good things happen there.
Right. It's just
So
like the knee and knee
example,
extension. Like try and get the quad firing all the way with a post-op ACL, and you don't have full terminal knee extension, it doesn't work.
Yeah, that VMO works as less 5 degrees. So if you're lacking 5 degrees, which most people will lack, you do quad sets till cows come home, and you're not going to get that effect.
Yep. So, and I would love it. I would freaking love it because I see a decent amount of ACLs. I would love it if it was the fact that they could get there on their own, giving them exercises, towel strap stretch, self-mobilizations, quad set for days, terminal knee extensions. I would love it if they could, because a lot of the times it doesn't feel great, especially post-op ACL. I've tried that. It's a different story for another day of trying to make that as comfortable as possible, but they just can't attain that extension on their own a lot of times. So the manual therapy, do that first, then have them fire all they want, and it's generally a lot better. So there's no difference. I feel like a lot of times we isolate a joint and say, oh, research supports that and that theory behind it, but then we move to another joint, that theory no longer works, but probably in reality it does.
Yep, carry over. And too many people try and hang their hat on the letter of the law of research.
Yes, that we know. Topic for another discussion, another day. Any other nuggets of knowledge to get those glutes going? No, so maybe favorite exercises, maybe post table life. I do like the side plank, which is in that article that I put up before. If done correctly, which I can say nobody does well independently, even myself at times. And that was another thing in my fellowship weekend was the guy running the course. He sees a 3-to-1, so three patients to one therapist per hour. He's just like, I can't trust him to do the bridge. He's like, I don't give him out because I know most people are going to start with lumbar extension. Even if I leave him for a little bit, he's like, it's not worth, especially for back pain issues, causing that excessive extension. If extension bothers them, or for extension purposes, like if extension's the aggravating factor. But go ahead.
Something I used to do, I've kind of moved away from it, but having them bring one leg into their chest, which will kind of put them into some flexion and have them avoid. Now they can't really go on a extension. That's a variation I used to do. You can
for a single leg bridge.
Well, just a bridge in general. I don't care how high they get up. I just need them using their hip and not their low back and using their glute. So that's a good one. Some people will even play with wedging a lacrosse ball on one hip and flexing it up. Again, now you're firing up or activating those hip flexors. So we know we're not going to get the opposite muscles working there. I like the planks with the glute squeezes. I'll do those. Hip thrusters. I like single leg stuff. I'll try and get people doing single leg stuff, or maybe even
RDLs
off center. So if, you're doing a bridge and their feet are like that. Can I bring one leg back? That's going to kind of bias one side more. I love my RDLs, my kickstands, things like that, step ups. I love my lunges, but all these have to obviously be performed correctly, because if not, they're going to be using their back or their quads. And most of these exercises really should be the glutes, the prime mover, and the quads are going to be, carrying or following secondary, I should say. So yeah, I'd say that's pretty much, what I do. Most of my stuff.
Perfect. And as you said, most people can use quads and back. Again, the body takes a path of like least resistance, or the easiest muscles that they've been frequently using for years and years. So again, you have to stay on top of people. You can prescribe the best set of exercises. I can't count on my hands how many times I've gotten clients, and when I ask them like why they came here and if they had previous therapy, what they were doing in therapy, when the therapist was prescribing the right things. They must have did a good enough assessment. But when I went to go look at those things, they were done absolutely wrong. Like just the client was doing it the way that, it was easiest for them.
Some of that belongs on the client too. And, we can always just bastardize other clinicians. Some of it does fall on the clinicians. A lot of it does, but sometimes patients just don't put the time in. Those are the ones that really typically don't get better.
Yeah. And we can talk about that one day. Is how compliant are people really with their home exercise programs? But that's for another day. But I think that's pretty good. I think that was a good episode. And thanks for tuning in. Oh, and just some quick housekeeping of things. If you're enjoying our podcast and listening into this please feel free to rate us on iTunes podcast or Apple podcast and that sort of stuff. Helps get us out there a little bit. We have upcoming course, Brandon and I at Brandon, you can talk about that.
Yeah, we have September 19th. It's a fun one-day course, extremity manipulations, upper and lower, covering both. So if you're struggling with some extremity pathologies or want to improve your manual therapy or clinical decision making, this is the course for you. Like I said, one day approved for in New Jersey, 7.5. I think in New York it's 8.5 or 9. Providing PPE, obviously taking the health precautions necessary. We're hosting a lumbo-pelvic course at Jeremy's Clinic in Glassboro, New Jersey, October 24th, 25th. So all you South Jersey and Philly cats, hope to see some of you guys out there. And then we have probably our biggest course up to date is our spinal manip course in December, early December. I forget the exact date. It's that first Saturday, Sunday though. We also have our manual therapy mentorship, which obviously goes beyond manual therapy, but we're actually rocking and rolling with that now. We have, what do we got? 6-7 people signed up with a couple more looking to join. So hopefully we get to that 10 spot soon, but we're getting some good calls, some great dialogue and discussion. People are really starting to dive into it. So if you guys are looking for some mentorship, want to hone your manual skills and your clinical skills and even business related skills, all three of us, myself, Jeremy, and Kyle, are all business owners. We have been for multiple years. We've dealt with insurances, out of network, cash, hybrid, whatever you want to call it. We all are fellowship trained or are in the process, as Jeremy is, and he's close to being done. So it really is probably the highest quality of education you're going to get aside from probably doing a fellowship program itself. And the cost is definitely way cheaper. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to one of us and we'd be happy to answer them. And hopefully one day we'll see you guys on there.
Awesome. Looking forward to all that. And feel free to reach out to us at Manips and Sips on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can reach out to me at The Decent Doctor and at Trifecta Therapeutics. And you can reach out to Brandon at Think Like a Fellow and at Pursue PT Now. Thanks for listening, everyone, and cheers.
All right, cheers, guys.